Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description. Naruto, yawning widely, entered the hotel room. Walking to her room, not forgetting to kick Jiraiya, who was sleeping after another drinking bout, the girl opened the door. A clean room with a closet, a table, and an orange backpack in the corner appeared before her. Walking to the backpack, the girl opened it and took out a clean scroll. A month ago, she, Jiraiya, and Hashirama left Konoha. Of course, they weren't allowed to leave the land of fire. But this didn't upset Uzumaki one bit. Now she would know her country like the back of her hand. Tsunade also gave the order to send her travel reports every week. Hashirama and Jiraiya shifted this responsibility onto Naruto's shoulders, arguing that one had already written too much in his life, and the other had terrible handwriting. And it didn't matter that he was a writer. In fact, both were too lazy, so they shifted everything onto the poor girl. Naruto, of course, was offended. And she took revenge. She knew how to do mischief. As a result, for a whole week in a row, Jiraiya and Hashirama listened to the cries of cats under the windows of their hotel rooms. And even the impenetrable barrier they had installed did not help. The other residents did not hear these chants. However, Naruto soon got tired of this, and the girl simply began to do small mischief. Thus, not only taking revenge on her offenders, but also developing her espionage skills. The month of travel passed relatively quietly, almost peacefully, and almost calmly. During this time, the travelers managed to visit about 10 villages and 5 towns. Constant movement was necessary. Firstly, Akatsuki had made too much noise recently, having killed several S-class prisoners who had escaped from prison. And since they were looking for Jinchuriki, they had to be led astray. Naruto herself wanted to walk around the land of fire. Hashirama wanted to see how much the place where he was born had changed. Well, and Jiraiya needed more information for his books. Also recently, Ero-sanin, seeing how literate his student was, decided to assign her to edit his books. And although Uzumaki actively resisted, in the end the Sannin persuaded the student, promising her a bunch of cool and strong techniques. And if you consider that instead of the editor's name, Jiraiya promised to write some pseudonym, then Naruto agreed, having previously scolded the teacher for the corruption of minors and sent a complaint to Tsunade. In general, the blonde never complained. But she didn't want to miss such a chance to see a pale and frightened Jiraiya. The sadistic tendencies in the girl had awakened after all. Hashirama, by the way, was delighted with the books, although at first he scolded Jiraiya for such an attitude towards the poor girl. However, reading Uzumaki's corrected version of Jiraiya's new book changed Senju's opinion. Also, Naruto, although she did not learn new techniques, honed her taijutsu. After the battle with Sasuke, the chakra channels took a long time to recover, and the girl could not begin real training. Therefore, for now she studied close combat styles. And of course, she trained with a sword. A real iron sword replaced her old wooden one. After finishing the last line of her report to Tsunade, Naruto put a period and while the ink was drying, leaned back, collapsing right onto the floor. Putting her hands under her head, the girl thought about how her friends were currently living in Konoha. If you believe Guy's rare letters, Tenten has recently learned to use a new weapon that could fire up to 50 kunai per second. Lee is actively recovering, and in 2 weeks he will be able to start training. With minimal stress on the body, of course. Niji, thanks to the efforts of Tsunade and Shizun, has recovered, and is now training with Hinata under the guidance of the head of the Hyuga clan, Hayashi Hyuga. Shikamura plays shogi all day long, improving his skills as a leader, calculating various strategies and unexpected turns in the battle. Kiba has been actively training with Akamaru and, it seems, they are now finishing a new joint technique. Choji has moved away from his clan's combat pills, and is now gaining weight, while simultaneously developing clan techniques. And Tsunade recently wrote that Sakura asked to be her student. In general, Naruto was indifferent to Haruno's fate. But the fact that the kunoichi had finally come to her senses could not but please. Closing her eyes, Uzumaki mentally imagined her battle with Kimimaro and Sasuke. Memories of this kept the girl from sleeping. She often woke up because of nightmares where the Sand Trinity did not make it in time, and her friends died. Naruto understood that she had to become stronger. However, real training with chakra could only begin in 2 weeks, which drove the girl crazy. She understood how weak she was, and tried to become stronger, but it was impossible. If this were a normal situation, Uzumaki would easily bypass the ban. She didn't give a damn about any doctor's orders, especially at a time like this. But Tsunade strictly forbade it and threatened the girl that if she started studying earlier, then she would not see any land of fire, only the gray walls of the Uzumaki estate. And Kurama and Hashirama watched the girl, not letting her do anything stupid. And Jiraiya generally put some kind of seal that allowed using only the amount of chakra necessary for a person's daily life and walking on walls. Naruto would easily remove this seal, but alas, the girl was unfamiliar with it. She had to endure it. Having carefully rolled up the paper with the dried ink, the girl put the report into the eagle postman's bag and, bringing the bird to the window, shook it with her hand, thereby giving it the order to fly. Uzumaki took a deep breath of the frosty air. Winter had recently arrived in the land of fire, and therefore Christmas was coming soon. And Naruto loved Christmas presents, the festive mood, the tree, the garlands. In Konoha, this holiday was always celebrated on a grand scale. The entire village was decorated with spruce and pine branches, huge glass balls with various patterns on them hung everywhere, garlands, like snakes, wrapped around lampposts. The smell of pies came from the houses, and all the residents hurried to the nearby temples to pray for good luck for the coming year and receive a small prediction. The shinobi decided to spend Christmas in a small village. There weren't that many residents there, so it was possible to book a free place in a restaurant, which was impossible in larger settlements. All the tables and restaurants were occupied on Christmas Eve. Jiraiya, Hashirama, and Naruto stayed at the hotel. Senju immediately hurried to the nearest restaurant to reserve a table. And Ero-sanin went to find out what events would be held on Christmas. Naruto, left alone in her room, laid out her things and, taking the scrolls with the gifts for her friends sealed in them, hurried to their rooms. In the land of fire, it was customary to put gifts next to the beds, so Uzumaki hid small scrolls behind the legs of the beds, covering them with a barrier. At the right moment, the barrier was supposed to open, and a small part of the wind chakra, with which the technique was created, was supposed to push the scrolls so that it opened. And after it opened, the gifts would automatically be unsealed. This mechanism was designed simply but, as time has shown, very effectively. Jiraiya soon returned with some papers in his hands. Having handed one to Uzumaki, the man sat down under the kotatsu. After all, it was cool in the room. Soon Hashirama came up. He also sat down under the kotatsu, scolded the cold weather and stared with interest at the leaflets lying on the table. He picked one up and studied it carefully. Perhaps, after dinner at the restaurant, I will go to the temple to pray, and then take a walk in the park. What are your plans? Senju asked. I'm with you, Naruto looked at her friend. Only after the temple I'll go to the hotel and watch the fireworks from the roof. Well, and then I'll go to bed. Well, I think after the restaurant I'll go to some bar and gather some information. Jiraiya blushed, to which Naruto only chuckled. By the way, where did you book the table? Asked the girl. Oh. It was very difficult. I barely found a free place. I had to run around half the village. But I still found the perfect place. The restaurant is called Bull's Horn. The name is more suitable for a bar, Uzumaki noted. Yes, but still, this place is truly wonderful. The first one threw up his hands. And the hall is beautifully decorated, and the menu is good. Okay then. Uzumaki nodded. Thoughts of delicious food swept all suspicions out of her head. The day passed quickly. The shinobi were busy preparing for the holiday in every possible way. Jiraiya and Hashirama were wrapping presents. Naruto was choosing warmer clothes. After all, it was cold outside the hotel. Afterwards, the friends bought red Christmas hats with white pom-poms on them. In the evening, the shinobi, as planned, went to a restaurant, receiving congratulations and congratulating everyone they met along the way. There was simply a festive mood in the air. In the evening, the decorated village was more beautiful than during the day. The residents lit up the garlands, and now the trees glowed in different colors because of the bulbs. Snow, which fell very, very rarely in the land of fire, crunched pleasantly underfoot. Here and there, children were having fun, playing snowballs. The restaurant was very warm and cozy. Taking off their jackets and hanging them on the backs of the chairs, the shinobi ordered. Naruto ordered the most. She was not a glutton, but the Jinchuriki's body required constant nourishment in the form of food. Uzumaki did not know why this was happening, but she had long accepted it as a given. Moreover, according to Kurama and Hashirama, Mito and Kushina also ate a lot. Soon they were served food. Wishing each other a bon appetit, the friends began to eat, chatting about pressing problems and completely irrelevant topics. After the meal, the shinobi went their separate ways. Jiraiya, as he said, went to the bar. And Naruto and Hashirama went to the temple. There was only one temple in the village, so now, during Christmas hours, it was packed with people. However, this did not stop the first and the Jinchuriki from going through the torii and stone images of the temple guardians. Having written their requests on Emma, Hashirama and Naruto hung them on special hooks. And then, approaching the Seizenbako, they rang the bell, announcing to the gods that they had come to pray to them. The friends threw in a coin and began to pray. "Let everything be fine in Konoha," Naruto asked, then opened her eyes. After that, the girl hurried to take the omikuji. She got luck, which she hurried to inform Hashirama about. "Really?" The man smiled, crumpling his paper unnoticed. "And I have a little luck." Naruto looked into her friend's face, realizing that he was lying. But she didn't want to ask him. If he wanted, he would tell her himself. They left the temple and went their separate ways, Hashirama to the park and Naruto to the hotel. Walking along the streets of the village, Uzumaki tried not to think about anything bad, taking a deep breath of fresh air. The way to the hotel did not take much time. The girl got there in literally 10 minutes. Jumping onto the roof, Uzumaki glanced at the clock visible from the window of the neighboring building. There was a little less than a minute left before the launch of the fireworks. Suddenly, several bright dots flew into the air, and a few seconds later, they exploded into beautiful multicolored patterns high in the sky. People poured out into the street, joyfully shouting and congratulating each other on Christmas. Naruto smiled, and tucking her legs under her and tilting her head to her shoulder, she mentally wished all her friends in Konoha a Merry Christmas. "Merry Christmas," echoed somewhere in Kurama's subconscious. "Listen, Naruto, I decided to teach you something." Jiraiya's voice suddenly rang out. "Really? Finally!" Uzumaki exclaimed. "It hasn't even been a year." Jiraiya frowned at his goddaughter, knowing she was right. He sighed heavily, put the book down, and crossed his arms over his chest. "To be more precise, I won't be teaching you," Sannin continued. "A good friend of mine will teach you this fighting style." "What are you talking about?" The girl slightly tilted her head to her right shoulder. "Remember you made a pact with the toads from Mount Maiboku? You won't forget about this." The girl snorted cheerfully. "So, Maibokuzen is a mountain where all the summoned toads live, from small to huge. These toads have their own habits, features, their own fighting style, and their own special techniques. I want you to learn the toad fighting style." "How is it different from the usual one?" asked Hashirama, who entered. He was holding a bag of sushi from the bar on the first floor of the hotel. Uzumaki couldn't help but lick her lips. After training with the Rasengan, her appetite had flared up again. Actually, practically nothing. Only less strength and energy is spent than with a normal fighting style. Also, in the toad style there is the ability to sharply change the pace of attacks and defense with less physical damage to yourself, explained Jiraiya. Convenient. Naruto unsealed one of the food containers. "But who will train me?" "Two of my acquaintances. They are the elders of this mountain, and also masters of their craft. Their names are Fukasaku and Shima." "Will I be trained by two toads?" Uzumaki's eyes lit up with joy. "More precisely, only Fukasaku. Shima will take care of you having a place to live and something to eat all this time." "When will Naruto go there?" Hashirama broke his chopsticks. "I think after dinner. The elders are eager to meet her." Jiraiya glanced at his niece. After Gamabunta and Gamakichi's stories, they were really fired up by the idea. The enthusiasm of these old men has awakened. Driven by thoughts of the upcoming training with the Toad Elders, Haim of the Uzumaki clan began to chew her food more actively, practically not feeling the taste. Hashirama, watching his protégé, only smiled. To his great regret, The path to Mount Mayaboku was closed to him. He had not signed a contract with the toads and, therefore, was an outsider to them. And outsiders were not tolerated there, if Jiraiya's stories were to be believed. Of course, he could have signed a contract with the toads, but Hashirama had no need for that. There was just over a year left, and he would disappear from this world. No matter how you look at it, Naruto's 14th birthday was approaching at a terrifying speed. And after October 10th, another year would pass, and that would be it. He would have to wander the world of the dead again. Such thoughts always made Senju feel sad. He didn't tell the girl that according to the agreement with Shinigami he would stay here until Naruto turned 15. And why upset her? It would be better for him to tell her later, a month or two before his departure. In the meantime, he could enjoy life in the world of the living and protect Uzumaki in every possible way, making her a strong shinobi so that she could stand up for herself and not die when meeting a serious opponent. Let's go to Mayabokuzen quickly. The blonde's enthusiastic voice interrupted Hashirama's thoughts. Yes, wait a little, Jiraiya sighed heavily. First, I have to warn you about something. Time passes faster in Mayabokuzen than here. 1 day here is equal to 2 weeks there. You will be training there for about a month, so Hashirama and I will not have time to miss you. This is extremely convenient, Uzumaki admired. I completely agree with you, Jiraiya smiled and stood up. Are you coming or what? I'm already running. The girl jumped out sharply, running up to her godfather. See you later, Hashirama. Good luck to you, Senju shouted after him. Standing on the hill, Naruto looked around with an ecstatic expression. Mount Mayaboku was very beautiful. The huge burdocks, tall grass, and many streams made the place wet and beautiful. It seemed like this was it, paradise for any frog or toad. Beauty, Uzumaki smiled. Of course. I remember when I came here for the first time, I was very surprised, Jiraiya grinned. I even described this place in my first book. Another porno? The girl narrowed her eyes contemptuously. No. My first book was about a shinobi and his meaning of life. Then I'll read it sometime. A few seconds later, a small green toad with a beard and a cloak appeared on the hill. From Jiraiya's reaction, Uzumaki realized that it was Fukasaku, her teacher for the next month. Of course, he looked weak and old, but the blonde never judged anyone by appearance alone. She was sure that since Jiraiya had spoken so highly of Fukasaku while they were preparing to go to Mayabokuzen, this toad was strong and would be able to teach the girl a lot. At least, that was what she hoped for. You're Naruto-chan, right? The toad asked, studying the girl with an attentive gaze. Yes. And you are Fukasaku-san? Uzumaki tried to show as much respect as possible to her future teacher. That's right, he nodded. Follow me, I'll introduce you to Shima. After all, you'll be living at our house the whole time. And you, he turned to Ero-san, and go back. She'll come herself when she's finished. Okay, Jiraiya nodded and turned to Uzumaki. Survive there. And disappeared. The girl looked suspiciously at the place where her godfather had stood not long ago. What was this, survive there? But deciding to leave it for later, the girl hurried after her teacher. So, here's how it is. Your teacher gave us a month, he said as he walked. But in that time, of course, you won't learn the Sannin mode. So for now, I'll teach you to keep your balance and fight with the toad style of combat. Well, and I think if we have time, you'll try to enter the Sannin mode. But remember, to master this mode, you must die. Eh? Naruto froze in surprise. What do you mean? You have to die. With each passing second, this situation was becoming either a really bad comedy or an assassination attempt. Uzumaki was not happy with either of those. I was joking. Fukasaku laughed. Naruto slapped her forehead. In fact, in order to sense natural energy, you have to remain still. You'll have to renounce your other senses and listen to nature. But that's very dangerous, and you're still too young for that, so you won't be able to enter the Sannin mode for the next 3 years. But can you at least tell us about this regime? Uzumaki pleaded. She was very interested in the new power, which, unfortunately, she would receive in at least 3 years. Although the girl understood perfectly well why Fukasaku was not going to teach her anything now. Jiraiya once casually mentioned that he had some kind of Sannin mode. But he especially emphasized the fact that he had been training for a very long time, but was never able to achieve the final form. The training, according to him, was very exhausting. And this despite the fact that Jiraiya was a year or two older than her. Good. But first, let's talk about the difference between ninjutsu and senjutsu. Fukasaku began his lecture. When a ninja uses ninjutsu, he uses the energy inside him, and Sage Mode allows him to use the energy around him. So, in ninjutsu I use my own chakra. And in Sannin mode, she thought, choosing the word natural? Not exactly. In hermit mode, the ninja mixes his chakra with natural chakra, thereby adding a third component to spiritual and physical energy. And thus, ninjutsu and taijutsu become much stronger than they were before. I see, the blonde thought. And that's convenient. Yes. Now I'll introduce you to my wife, Shima. She's a fantastic cook. As it turned out, during the conversation they managed to reach the house where Fukasaku lived. A small toad with purple curly hair met them at the door. She was wearing a house apron, which suggested that she had just stopped cooking. Oh. Well, finally. I've been waiting for you two for a long time. So you are Naruto? Asked the toad, looking at the girl. Yes. It's very nice to meet you, the girl bowed politely. And you, I see, are polite, Shima grinned. That's good. Wash up and go to the table. Uzumaki nodded and hurried after Fukasaku. The toad's house didn't have a running water system like Naruto's apartment. However, they had an analog. Water was passed from house to house through leaves rolled into a tube. And instead of a regular faucet, there was a cast iron wash basin. Having quickly washed her face and hands, the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki hurried to the table where Fukasaku was already sitting. Shima, smiling, left plates with insects in front of her husband and guest. Uzumaki tightly closed her eyes and suddenly opened them. The insects had not disappeared anywhere. No, the girl, of course, knew what toads ate. But she hoped that since Fukasaku and Shima were summoned animals, they ate like people. But her hopes, unfortunately, were not justified. Under Shima's watchful gaze and Kurama's loud laughter in her subconscious, Naruto took a spoon in her hand and scooped up some of the broth from the caterpillar soup. And it was now that the girl understood why Jiraiya wanted to survive here. With each passing day, Naruto became more and more accustomed to life among the toads. She had already managed to become good friends with many of them, but had fallen out with some of them. And she had no intention of making peace. The body's reaction to the food became less calm. At least the girl stopped feeling sick. With her eyes closed, Uzumaki imagined that slightly burnt chicken skin was crunching on her tongue, and not another caterpillar. It seemed to be working for her so far. But the blonde did not agree to more. If she had known that this would happen, she would have eaten the sushi Hashirama brought more slowly before leaving. The training was exhausting. At first, Naruto could barely move. After all, she hadn't worked out for quite some time after the injury, and her muscles were groaning after a good warm-up. Then it got easier. The ointments that Shima smeared on the girl for the first week dulled almost all the pain. Well, and then the muscles got used to it, and there was no need for ointments, although Naruto kept a couple of jars for herself just in case. The training itself was quite unique. Naruto got up every morning at 8, washed herself, got dressed, ate, and went to the huge stone needles. There, taking a small board, Uzumaki first climbed onto one of these needles. And then, putting the board on it, she tried to sit on this point. And if it weren't for Fukasaku, who was sitting opposite her, the girl would have definitely decided that this was unrealistic, since she herself couldn't even sit on this board, constantly falling down. However, over time, she managed to sit straight and practically not move. True, this state lasted no more than 10 seconds. Then the Jinchuriki fell down, getting another bump on her head. After that there was lunch. Well, and then Naruto and Fukasaku went to the clearing, where the toad taught the girl the toad style of fighting. Or, as it is also called, the toad fist style. In fact, it was no different from regular taijutsu, except that the blows were done together with chakra. In general, the toad fist style should ideally be used not only with regular chakra, but also with natural chakra. However, since the girl did not know how to control senjutsu, Fukasaku had to teach her to fight only with her own chakra for now. And it was very difficult. For such a fighting style, excellent chakra control was needed, and the blonde's was still lame. Due to the fact that the girl was not only the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, but also a representative of the Uzumaki clan, she had a huge reserve of chakra. And often the girl, using any technique, spent too much energy. That's why Shima taught her charge to control chakra in the evenings using basic Irien-jutsu. At first, Uzumaki practically pulled worms and snails back from the dead using a special scroll. Afterwards, she tried to do it without any additional help. And just recently, when a half-dead slug started moving again, Shima entrusted the blonde with treating fractures in toads. After another week, or more, Naruto learned to sit quietly on a board on the tip of a stone needle, without moving at all. She even tried to absorb some natural chakra in secret from Fukasaku, but the result was nothing. She only got a couple of bruises. She was distracted by a fly flying past. Things had also progressed with the toad style of fighting. Now, smashing stones with her fist, each about a meter in size. The girl reminded herself of Tsunade. True, the effect was not as strong as if Senju had fought. Naruto also became more skilled in her Irien-jutsu abilities. Now there was no need to worry about waiting for medical help after being wounded. The girl could now heal her wounds herself. Not all of them, of course. Her control was poor for serious wounds, but most of them for sure. Well, since you learned the basics so quickly, I think you can try to enter Sannin mode. 2 days before Uzumaki left for Hashirama and Jiraiya, Fukasaku suggested. You already have a good base. Well, are you going to try? Of course. Uzumaki rejoiced. But just remember, Jiraiya must not know about this, okay? The toad said in a conspiratorial tone. Of course. Naruto smiled mischievously. So, first, you must form a special seal of concentration. Watch and repeat after me. Fukasaku connected the first phalanges of the fingers of both hands so that the knuckles rubbed against each other. The Jinchuriki repeated after him. Then you must completely immobilize. No unnecessary movements. Remember how you sat on those pieces of wood and repeat it now. If you want, you can sit down. The main thing is not to move. The blonde obediently sat down on the ground. Now close your eyes and try to feel nature. Renounce other feelings. Just you and the world around you. No more, no less. Naruto closed her eyes and, breathing evenly, tried to listen to nature. Little by little, the surrounding sounds began to disappear, and a pleasant bliss spread through her body. Not paying attention to anything else, the girl succumbed to a feeling of strange lightness. She fell asleep. Summed up Gamakichi, sitting next to Fukasaku. Should I wake her up? Don't touch her, the toad shook its head. She's exhausted from all this time. So let her at least get some sleep. She deserves it. Of all the seasons, Naruto probably loved summer the most. The girl didn't like the rains in autumn, because they brought sadness. If it snowed in Konoha in winter, it was a miracle. But for the most part, it was just freezing cold outside, nothing more. Spring was indifferent to Uzumaki. And no matter what people said about nature awakening from sleep, the girl didn't care about any of it. But summer was a wonderful time of year, as Naruto thought. It got dark late, the sun rose early, which allowed the blonde to spend more time outside without fear of getting carried away by something to such an extent that in a moment, and night fell. Moreover, in summer you could swim in a lake or a river. And Uzumaki loved to swim. So our next stop is the village of sunbeams? The Jinchuriki asked, carefully examining the map of the land of fire. That's right, nodded Jiraiya. They make very tasty sake there. I tried it once about 20 years ago. And I still can't forget its divine taste. Uzumaki grimaced. Sake. Ugh. She didn't like any kind of alcoholic drink at all. Once upon a time, when she was about 9 years old, Naruto accidentally confused a bottle of water with a bottle of sake that Hashirama brought. The alcoholic drink tasted disgusting, but a little sweet. The blonde didn't like the combination. And there is also the country house of the daimyo of the land of fire, smiled Hashirama. He rarely rests there, but they say that you can often see his niece there. Does she live there or something? Uzumaki tilted her head slightly to the side. Practically, Jiraiya nodded. She rests there quite often and spends most of her time. I see, said Uzumaki. What else is interesting there? The village is small, but very beautiful, Jiraiya began to recall. All the houses there are surrounded by stone fences, so there are a huge number of alleys. There are several roads there, and they are all large and made of stone slabs. At the entrance to the village there are huge gates with patterns in the form of dragons. There is also a main square. Some holidays or festivals are often held there. By the way, according to my calculations, we will come to the village of Sunbeams for dinner. And there, in an hour, the festival will begin. You will admire it and have fun, the hermit smiled. Okay. Uzumaki nodded, folding the map. 4 hours later, the Konoha trio found themselves in front of the gates of the Sunray village. They were exactly as Jiraiya had described. 2 stone beams were engraved with patterns of dragons, with their long bodies entwined around them. On the gates themselves, which were made of wood, were large images of suns with long rays. After passing through the gate, all 3 went to the gatekeepers, who were supposed to record who came and went from the village. Names? Asked the guy, dressed in a shinobi uniform with a sun on his forehead protector. Jiraiya from Konoha. The hermit introduced himself. And this is Uzumaki Naruto and Takoshi Hayato. Hashirama raised his hand in greeting. He had to hide his identity, because everyone knew the founder of Konoha. And his presence in the village could seem very, very strange. And it could also bring a lot of different problems. Therefore, Senju often had to wear either an Anbu mask in the form of a deer's face, a gift from the Shinigami, or underhenge with a false name. Purpose of the visit? Asked the guard. Jiraiya thought. Visiting the festival and resting before the journey. And I really want to try your signature sake. How long will you stay here? About a week, Hashirama answered. Okay, the guy said, scribbling something, and then unrolled the scroll towards the guests. Put your signatures on it. Jiraiya took the outstretched brush and signed in the field where the check mark was. Naruto and Senju repeated his maneuver. Hashirama's signature, of course, was also fake. That's it. Take the brochure, the guard nodded at the stack of flyers on the table. And have a nice rest. Thank you. Ero-sanin nodded, taking 3 booklets in his hands. Goodbye. The guy at the registration desk answered somewhat distantly, filling out some new scroll. The village itself was also very beautiful. As Jiraiya had said, there were houses on both sides of the road, surrounded by low stone fences. The road itself was clean and made of stone, painted green. Walking past one of the alleys, Naruto looked in and was somewhat surprised to see that there was a road again, but this time blue, running through 2 houses. Why are the roads here multicolored? The girl asked. According to this brochure, there are only 7 roads here, and they go in the order of the colors of the rainbow. And the streets are named after the color of the road. Green Street is the main one here, since it goes straight from the entrance to the village. And on Orange Street is the house of the daimyo, answered Senju, not looking up from the flyer. Wow, Uzumaki whistled. They did a good job here. And most importantly, it's comfortable and beautiful. Of course, smiled Jiraiya. All the roads connect at the main square called Rainbow. And then they diverge again, but on the other side. By the way, despite the name, the square itself is white. There is also a road around the entire village. It runs close to the walls and is called Black Path. Guess what color the stones are painted there? In black? Senju suggested. Aha! Ero-sanin nodded contentedly. Yeah, people here have an uncontrollable imagination. They come up with such unusual names, Uzumaki snorted. Very unusual, isn't it? Hashirama clearly didn't understand the sarcasm. When will the festival start? The Jinchuriki changed the topic. It's 6:30 now, right? Jiraiya clarified. Then in half an hour. In the meantime, I suggest we find a hotel and drop our things there. However, the hotel was found quickly. Although the village was small, everything here was top-notch after all. The daimyo sometimes stays here, so it is necessary to maintain cleanliness, order, and comfort. And most importantly, the prices were not too high, which was quite surprising. The available room was small, but equipped with everything you need: 3 beds, a table, a TV, a refrigerator, chairs, and even a kotatsu hidden in the closet for winter days. After dropping off their things, the travelers rested, had a little dinner. After all, they had to leave room for food from the festival, chatted, and went outside. The previously virtually deserted streets were bustling with activity. Residents hurried to the square, where tents with games, food, and entertainment were already set up. Many were dressed in yukatas, while others opted for casual clothing. Naruto smiled. Finally, she would have a proper time at the festival. No one would look at her with hatred and contempt while she tried to get goldfish with a paper net, and no curses and wishes for a quick death would fly at her back. At first, the girl decided to test her accuracy. So for the first 10 minutes, she was busy shooting a water pistol at the wide-open mouth of a frog picture on the wall. As a result, Uzumaki received a small plush bunny, for some reason blue. Next was cotton candy. Naruto had tried this cotton candy a long time ago, but almost 7 years had passed since then, and its taste had already been forgotten. However, one thing was imprinted in the blonde's memory: the cotton candy was tasty and sweet. Therefore, Uzumaki hurried to spend a few yen on this treat. And I didn't regret it, even though my whole face was so sweet and sticky afterwards that I had to wash my face at a small drinking fountain. Then Naruto went to the middle of the square, where the show was being held. According to the flyers, the 5 best marksmen in Sunbeam Village would meet today at exactly 7:30 and compete for the title of the village's best marksman. There were only 5 minutes left before the tournament began, so Uzumaki hurried to the middle of the square in order to take one of the best places, where everything would be visible at a glance. Such a place was found almost immediately. There was a fence around the battlefield that prevented spectators from getting inside. There were 5 targets on the battlefield itself, with alternating red and white circles. And on the circles themselves, the numbers from 1 to 10 were written in black. 60 meters away from them, a long white line was drawn, behind which were small stumps. For shooters, Uzumaki realized. Soon other spectators began to arrive, and in a couple of minutes, it seemed like all the villagers were lined up around the shooting range. Looking at the opposite side, Naruto noticed a familiar head of white hair, which indicated that Jiraiya, and possibly Hashirama with him, whom she had left behind at the very beginning of the festival, had also come to watch the shooting range. "Hello?" A clear girl's voice rang out next to the blonde. Turning around, the Jinchuriki saw a girl about her age. She had her short dark hair tied into a small, barely holding ponytail, but one strand had come loose and was falling right onto the girl's face. "Hello?" Uzumaki smiled, looking into the girl's slightly slanted eyes, the irises of which were a violet shade. Naruto frowned. She had seen this girl somewhere before. "But where?" "My name is Hofuna, and yours?" "I am Naruto." Hofuna smiled and took a small step back. The light from the lantern illuminated her face, and Naruto could see the faint freckles on her cheeks and slightly upturned nose. "What an unusual name," the girl said. "They originally wanted to call me Naruto, after those ramen spirals. However, it was a girl, so they slightly adjusted my name, adding the suffix ko," Uzumaki explained. "Really? How funny! But my parents named me Hofuna because they wanted me to always be rich and not need anything." She thoughtfully brought her finger to her lips. "That's good. Your parents love you and want you to always be well off." "I don't know," the girl sighed. "In the last 6 years they have become very distant from me, sending me to this village more and more often." "I see." Uzumaki didn't know what to say to that, so she quickly changed the subject. "Look! The shooting ranges are already starting." And indeed, 5 contenders for the role of the village's most accurate shooter had already come out to the shooting range. Among them were 4 guys and 1 girl. All 5 were wearing identical white suits and masks on their faces, which did not allow one to see what the shooter looked like. "So," the judge spoke loudly, and the noise immediately died down. "Welcome to the 23rd competition for the title of the best marksman in the village of Sunbeams. Today we have 5 contenders competing. The first of them is Rich. He lives on Orange Street. The second contestant is Heidi, who lives on Blue Street. The third participant is Monosuk, who lives right by the Black Road. The fourth, charming and beautiful lady is Hannah, who lives on Yellow Street. And lastly, last year's winner is Yamamoto, also living on Yellow Street." With each performance, the crowd cheered and applauded. Why does the judge name the street where the participants live? Naruto quietly asked Hofyun. It's obvious that you're not a local. If a person living on a street wins any village competition, then his street immediately gets extra glory and points. Glasses? Uzumaki asked again, thinking about the glasses that people with poor eyesight usually wear. Yes, nodded Hofyun. Points, scores, call it what you want. And at the end of the year, the street with the most points gets a cup and a small cash reward. Wow. Cool. And now we begin the first stage of archery, announced the judge and, at the same time, the orator. The participants nodded, taking up the bows and arrows assigned to them. Then on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. A deafening whistle rang out across the range. The shooters, as one, released their arrows from their fingers, and they cut through the evening air and stuck into the targets. Second time. 1, 2, 3. Everything repeated itself again. Naruto was taken aback. It was the first time she had seen archers shoot a bow. Before that, she had only seen shinobi throw their shuriken and kunai in all 4 directions. But archery. This was something new and surprising for the princess of the Uzumaki clan. And for the last time. 1, 2, 3. The arrows hit the targets for the 3rd time. The judge immediately jumped up to the targets and began counting the points of each shooter. Rich gets 25 points, he announces, moving away from one target and approaching the next. Heidi has 20 points, the shooter sighs sadly. Monosuke has 26 points, the judge continues counting. Hana also shot 26 points, the girl happily jumped up on the spot. And Yamamoto, having hit the center of the target twice, gets 29 points. The crowd roared with joy. Many of those present supported Yamamoto, as he had already been the most accurate archer last year, and was a contender for the title this year. And this Yamamoto is not bad. Naruto nodded her head, applauding along with everyone else. Of course. Hofyun grinned. And based on the results of the first stage, Rich and Hayes leave the tournament. And Yamamoto, Monosuke and Hana advance to the second round. The 2 archers placed their bows on small stumps standing nearby and walked away from the range towards the spectators, where they were immediately met by their family and friends. The second stage is already more difficult. The announcer continued to speak. The participants must hit the moving targets. Only 2 attempts. At this stage, only 1 player is eliminated, and the remaining 2 become finalists. Suddenly the targets, which had been standing motionless until then, began to groan and move, moving left and right, back and forth, diagonally and even slightly rising upwards. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. The referee put the whistle to his lips and blew loudly. The arrows, as in the previous stage, are released and fly into the targets at the same time. Excellent. Once more. 1, 2, 3. The archers shot their arrows again. And the targets were still moving, not stopping for a second. And then Hana's arrow flew past the target, hitting the ground. The targets immediately stopped with a quiet creak, and the judge approached the first of them, counting the points earned by the participants. In the end, Yamamoto gets 16 points, the crowd hummed joyfully. Hana only gets 7 points, the judge sighs, approaching the last target. And Monosuke gets 14 points. In the end, Hana leaves the training ground, and Yamamoto and Monosuke advance to the finals. The girl put the bow on a stump and, barely hiding her tears, left the training ground, leaving her opponents behind. I feel sorry for her, Uzumaki said quietly. She tried so hard, and in the end. Yeah, agreed Hofyun. But I think she'll try even harder next time. And now the last, final stage, the judge announced. Now the participants, while themselves in motion, must hit the moving targets, which is not so easy to do. They will shoot only once. And the one who hits closer to the center wins. Several assistants approached the stumps and removed them. As it turned out, the stumps were not real, but dummies. And underneath them were children's toy horses. They were small in size, but were attached to a hard metal surface with the help of a huge spring. One easy movement of the rider, and the spring rocked the horse around its axis. The participants sat on these artificial horses and immediately began to spin from side to side. "Shoot on the count of 3, announced the referee. 1, 2, 3. The archers took aim and fired at the targets. Yamamoto missed, but Monosuke hit the 4. And now we have a winner! Monosuke hits the target and becomes the most accurate shooter in Sunbeam Village. Congratulations! The crowd applauded, whistled and hooted, shouting the winner's name. Yamamoto sighed and put his hand on the winner's shoulder, saying something to him. Monosuke nodded and put away his bow, then walked up to the judge, removing his mask along the way. Uzumaki gasped. This guy was a year or 2 older than her. And to think he could beat the previous champion. He must have trained a lot, Kurama said. That was so exciting! Naruto exclaimed, coming out of her stupor and jumping up and down. I agree, nodded Hofyun. I come to see the shooting ranges every year. And every year it takes my breath away. By the way, how about we take a walk around the festival and catch some goldfish? Uzumaki suggested. I'm all for it. Hofyun smiled. Meanwhile, the winner was presented with a large cup and wished good luck in the future. Naruto woke up late. The sun was shining outside, people were running back and forth, and it was already 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Uzumaki had a lot of fun yesterday. It turned out that the festival is more fun to spend with a friend than alone. The girls laughed a lot, chatted, walked, because of which Hofyun's legs even hurt, and they had to sit down for half an hour, ate a lot of sweets, from which Naruto's stomach now hurts. Sitting up on the bed, the girl rubbed her eyes, which made them tingle unpleasantly and made her want to sleep even more. Haim shook her head, getting up and leaving her assigned room towards the toilet and bathroom. A sharp stream of cold water made Naruto jump away from the shower, but later the girl returned under the water, which had already warmed up. She emerged from the bathroom half an hour later in a terry robe and with wet hair that had darkened and matted with water. Good afternoon, Hashirama greeted her, sitting at the table and laying out the breakfasts brought by the maid. And you too, the girl nodded. Is that pervert still sleeping? Yes. He returned only in the morning. Let him sleep. Hashirama broke the chopsticks. Sit down and eat. Itadakimasu, Naruto said, sitting down at the table. How did you spend the festival? It was fun, and at the shooting range I met a girl. Her name is Hofyun, and she's a little younger than me. I'm glad you liked it. Senja smiled. And what did you do? I had fun too. And I also tried the sake here. Jiraiya wasn't wrong, it really is very tasty. I'm happy for you. The girl nodded. They finished eating in silence, after which Uzumaki thanked her mentor for the breakfast she had ordered and went to change. Since no fights were expected in the next 2 days, and life promised to be mundane, the blonde decided to put on the light orange dress she loved so much. True, the Jinchuriki noted with displeasure that it was already too small for her. If she grew a little more, she would no longer fit into it. Now Uzumaki has his first goal for today. Namely, to buy some new things. Walking along the orange street, which the girl accidentally turned into, Naruto was looking for a clothing store. However, Haim had not found anything worthwhile so far, except for the daimyo's house. Hello? Are you looking for something, Naruto? Asked a familiar voice. Uzumaki turned around and saw Hofyun sitting on a bench, which were located on all streets 30 meters apart. The blonde immediately smiled happily and approached her friend. Hi. Well, I need a clothing store. This dress is already too small, the girl pointed to her clothes. Oh. I see. But there are no clothing stores on Orange Street. They are mostly on Black Road. Do you want me to walk you there? I'll be only glad. The blonde smiled. The rest of the journey flew by unnoticed while they talked. The friends discussed everything from Naruto's type of activity to their impressions of recently released films. The clothing store was large and very neat. It was immediately obvious that it had been well looked after. Sando, the sign said. The friends immediately began to choose a new dress for Uzumaki. The blonde insisted on orange clothes, as she loved this bright light that attracted attention from afar. Why orange? Hofyun was indignant when her friend once again refused the blue skirt. I love it, that's all, the girl answered. For me, The orange color is like a legacy from my parents. I know it sounds stupid, but still. What do you mean? As a legacy? The brunette looked at Naruto in surprise. My father really liked yellow, and my mother liked red. In the rainbow, orange is between them and… I don't know, but for me it's some kind of sign, probably. Uzumaki shrugged. I told you, it sounds stupid. Your parents are dead, right? I think it's a little weird, but in a special way. She clapped her hands sharply. Good. We'll find you a decent orange thing. I swear. Can I help you with something? Asked the guy who came up. Naruto turned around and recognized him as Monosuke, the winner of the shooting range. Now Uzumaki could see him clearly. The boy was a green-eyed blonde. His hair framed his face in the front, and one strand fell directly onto his face. He was dressed in casual clothes, and on his chest he had a badge, which led Naruto to conclude that he was an employee of this store. Yes. We need an orange dress, Uzumaki stated. Let's look. Monosuke smiled, looking strangely at Hofyun. When the blonde turned away from her friend, she put her finger to her lips, as if to say, Be quiet and don't tell her anything. Monosuke nodded slightly, walking away to the hangers with women's clothes. That same evening, when Naruto was telling Hashirama about a successful day, people with swords suddenly burst into their room. They immediately grabbed the interlocutors and the recently awakened Jiraiya. What's going on? Hashirama asked without resisting. A tall man in a long, beautiful kimono stepped forward. He looked at the shinobi with an attentive gaze from under his glasses and said, You are accused of kidnapping the niece of the daimyo of the Land of Fire Hofyun Hanketsu. You are accused of kidnapping the niece of the daimyo of the Land of Fire Hofyun Hanketsu, said a tall man in a long, beautiful kimono. What do you mean? Who is this? We don't even know each other. Hashirama was indignant. What? Naruto's legs buckled. Are you saying that Hofyun is the niece of the daimyo of the Land of Fire? What nonsense! This can't be. She's so kind and sweet. She can't. The girl couldn't believe what she was hearing. Hofyun was the niece of the Fire Country's daimyo? According to rumors, the niece of the Fire Country's daimyo would be arrogant, proud, and squeamish. But the Hofyun she knew was kind, noble, cheerful, and such an ordinary girl. Recently, she has been seen with you, Uzumaki Naruto. Many people can confirm your close association. And the last person the young mistress was seen with was you. Monosuke Reitsu can confirm this. A few hours earlier, you were buying clothes in his family's store. Namely, a dress. Yes, that's true, but… We didn't kidnap Hofyun. Why would we do that? You are from Konoha. The Hokage can negotiate special favors for her village with the help of the lady. What nonsense! Jiraiya was surprised. Tsunade, of course, loves Konoha, but she will not kidnap the niece of the daimyo of the Land of Fire for the sake of privileges for the village. It doesn't matter, the man shrugged. You are accused of kidnapping Hofyun Hanketsu. We are arresting you for the time being. And if we find even one piece of evidence of your involvement, we will execute you. What nonsense is this? Uzumaki cried. Do you even hear what nonsense you're talking about? We didn't touch Hofyun. Let us go and let us find my friend. No! We'll organize a search party ourselves. Now take them to prison. Naruto realized that she had to get out. Stepping on the foot of the guard holding her, the girl hit him in the stomach with her elbow and freed herself. And then, having made several seals, she launched a powerful stream of water at several more guards. Jiraiya and Hashirama, meanwhile, also freed themselves, neutralizing the soldiers. With everyone beaten and unconscious, the shinobi quickly grabbed their belongings and ran out the window to the street. Below, the inn was surrounded by numerous guards. Senji used the ground break technique, causing the ground with the guards to rise, and then a huge slab broke in two. The soldiers fell in different directions, falling into Erosanen's mud swamp and losing the ability to move. Uzumaki immediately created a wooden lattice around the remaining guards. Run! Hashirama shouted, jumping onto the roof of the nearest house. A loud alarm blared throughout the village, signaling a state of emergency. Jiraiya cursed as he leapt towards Senju and Uzumaki. The first Hokage led his friends to the walls surrounding the village in order to escape. But as soon as they climbed the wall, a new problem appeared. The Sunray village was surrounded by a barrier that would not let them out. Damn it! We have to break it. Jiraiya used the earth release technique. It won't work, Naruto swallowed. This barrier was set up by the Uzumaki. I can't say how, but I feel something familiar and dear when I touch it. The girl touched the protection, which immediately spread circles. It won't let out those who are considered criminals. But when could it have been installed? Senju was surprised. Maybe during the Third Shinobi War, Jiraiya said coldly. At least if we can't get out of the village, we should at least hide. You're right. But where can we hide? However, they quickly found a place to hide. Having climbed into the house of a family of 3, the shinobi knocked them out and used henge. As a result, Naruto became a brunette of about 20 with a lot of freckles, Jiraiya became her father, a graying thin man, and Hashirama became his wife, a long-haired blonde of incredible height. The shinobi hid the bodies of the owners of the house in a small room. Now we need to decide what to do. Jiraiya sat down at the table. We can't get out of here, but we can't pretend to be someone we don't know forever. And we also can't let the guards catch us. Why? Hashirama was surprised. I'm sure we can calmly talk to them, explain everything. They don't even want to listen to us. Uzumaki exclaimed. Did you hear what nonsense that guy was saying? They've already labeled us criminals without any evidence. And anyway, we have to find Hofyun. But how can we do this? We can't get out of the village. Are you suggesting that we trust the search party? I'll have to. Haim Uzumaki Ikizoka sighed heavily. Not trusting the guards very much, Naruto decided to hang around them while they prepared for the campaign. An hour had passed since the emergency was declared. Things had calmed down a bit in the village, and the residents were no longer so afraid to leave their homes. On the contrary, they went for a walk specifically to try to find the kidnappers and receive the promised reward. Therefore, Uzumaki, under the guise of a shoemaker's daughter, as it turned out later, the man into whom Jiraiya transformed was a shoemaker, walked around the guards preparing for the campaign, delivering water and eavesdropping on their conversations. For me, this Minister Lin has been acting a little strange since the princess was kidnapped, one of the army men said. Uzumaki immediately listened, pretending that her shoelaces had come undone. What are you talking about? His interlocutor asked. Well, he immediately blamed everything on those shinobi from Konoha, without even understanding the situation. And in general, don't you think it's suspicious that he's somehow not too excited about what's happening? I don't know. Until you said it, I didn't even think about it. Why are you sitting on the road? Someone asked sternly. Uzumaki looked up and saw a military man with a captain's badge on his uniform. Not enough work? Go and spread all this water. We're leaving in a minute. I beg your pardon. Naruto immediately jumped up, quickly taking the flasks to the last guards. As soon as that same captain announced the start of the search, all the guards immediately lined up and set off. Haim watched them go and immediately headed home, where the others were waiting for her. Well? Jiraiya asked as soon as the Jinchuriki closed the door. Hashirama is right. We should let them capture us and try to talk to them. I want to talk to your boss. If that means you arrest me, then go ahead. Naruto stretches her arms out in front of her, waiting for her wrists to be handcuffed. But the guards just blinked, not understanding what was going on. Apparently, for the first time in their entire military career, a criminal was allowing himself to be arrested. The older soldier came to his senses faster, and soon handcuffs snapped onto Naruto's wrists. The girl whistled. They were suppressing chakra. She could no longer use shinobi techniques. And now you see me with that idiot who accused me and my friends of kidnapping Hofyun. The guards nodded and led the unresisting Uzumaki somewhere. Soon they reached the daimyo's house. Naruto raised an eyebrow in surprise, but said nothing. The soldiers led her through the garden, around the house, and entered through the back door. Then, after walking a couple of corridors, they pushed the girl toward the steps, hinting that she needed to go down to the basement. The blonde frowned, but obeyed. In the basement was a prison cell. Seriously? I thought this only happened in movies. Haim, however, calmly entered the cage and turned to the guards. When can I talk to that guy? If you mean the daimyo's advisor Lina-sama, he will talk to you later. Lin? Seriously? What a stupid name! The blonde snorted. The guards silently locked the cage, turned around and left. Uzumaki rolled her eyes, sitting down on the floor and looking around. The basement was semi-dark, lit only by one dim and flickering light bulb. The corners were generally pitch black, the light did not reach them. There was practically an open window by the stream, through which a little sunlight and fresh air passed. But this did not save from the heat and stuffiness. A person of my build could fit through a window like that, Uzumaki thought. If something goes wrong, I could try to escape through it. Suddenly, someone's clothes rustled in the corner. Turning to the source of the sound, the girl saw someone's short silhouette. Who are you? The blonde asked. Naruto? The silhouette froze. Hofyun? The girl asked in surprise, recognizing her friend's voice. And then she threw herself on her neck, hugging her tightly. What are you doing here? I don't know. When I was in my room, I was suddenly grabbed and knocked out. I only recently came to. But I must have dozed off a bit, since I didn't notice you coming. Where are we? And what's going on? I was told that you were kidnapped, and now my friends and I are being blamed for it, the girl said, confused. What? The brunette recoiled. We are now in the basement of the daimyo's house. By the way, why didn't you tell me that you are the niece of the daimyo of the Land of Fire? I wanted you to talk to me like a friend, not like a princess. Because of my position in society, I have no friends at all. And then you appeared and I just wanted to talk to you as an equal. I'm sorry, Hofyun lowered her head. Well, you know, I haven't told you everything either, so don't worry. Everything is fine. Noticing the tears on her friend's cheeks, Naruto hastened to assure her. I am Haim of the Uzumaki clan. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by the sound of a door slamming. Turning around, the friends saw Lin, the same man who had brought the accusations against Naruto. Finally! Uzumaki exclaimed. Here is Hofyun, so let us out and drop the charges. No, Lin replied, approaching the bars. So you're from the Uzumaki clan? How interesting. And how much will your clan pay us so that you won't be executed for kidnapping the daimyo's niece? What are you talking about? I didn't kidnap Hofyun. The blonde recoiled. She kidnapped me, of course. And then she threatened me. I'll even have a wound on my hand as proof. He showed his healthy hand. What's going on here? Hanketsu exclaimed. Allow me to explain, young lady, he said the last words with a grin. According to the official version, last night a certain Uzumaki Naruto, along with her companions, Sannin Jiraiya and Takoshi Hayato kidnapped you from your room. After we found their lair, we accused them, but the criminals escaped. But not for long. They were unable to get out of the village, and we soon arrested them. During interrogation, Uzumaki Naruto managed to wound me, the daimyo's advisor, in the arm, but she was quickly calmed down by the guards. And then she confessed that she personally killed Hofyun Hanketsu. Of course, the daimyo will not leave it like that and will come here to sort out the situation. And then Sannin Jiraiya will kill him. What a scandal it will be! The Hokage will recognize Uzumaki Naruto, Jiraiya, and Takoshi Hayato as missing Nin and will authorize their public execution. And the daimyo's advisor will become the daimyo of the Land of Fire. What? Do you want to kill Uncle? Hofyun looked at Lin with hatred. You're just a monster. What it is, Lin smiled poisonously. But what can you do if in this world everything is decided by money and power? I've known you since childhood. You were never like this. And you never thought like this. Hofyun hugged herself. What happened to you? One man, Danzo, opened my eyes. Well, it's nice to stay. He bowed mockingly and climbed the stairs, slamming the door loudly. Naruto swallowed. This man was going to kill Hofyun and the daimyo, and blame it all on her, Hashirama, and Jiraiya. Also, many of the guards were clearly on Lin's side, based on what he said. And also, Danzo was somehow involved in this. We need to get out, the blonde said quietly, looking at her pale friend. First, the Haim of her clan and Hofyun found all the seals that gave the lattice these properties. Finding the seals was not the easiest thing, since some of them were hidden under the bricks. It was good that Uzumaki was a censor and, after some effort, found them. Then, Having peeled off and torn the seals, the girls began to think of how to open the lock of the grate. Then Hanketsu offered her hairpin. In theory it should have helped, but it didn't. Because neither Uzumaki nor Daimyo's niece knew how to open locks in this way. Then Naruto suggested a more effective method: create a key with the wood release right in the lock, and then turn it. And voila! The door is open. However, these actions had to be abandoned for now. Lin visited them again. When the moonlight began to shine through the window, and everything became quiet outside, Uzumaki took action. Opening the door, she quietly tiptoed out of the cell and motioned for Hofyun to follow her. The girl, picking up the hem of her long but beautiful kimono, followed her. "How do we get up there?" the girl whispered quietly. "It will all happen now." Naruto created 4 clones. The copies of the girl climbed on top of each other, after which the top clone climbed out through the window. The rest dispersed with a characteristic sound. Uzumaki hoped that the guards did not hear these claps. It turned out that it was in vain. 2 guards burst into the room. Fortunately, Naruto managed to drag her friend into the cell and close the door. So, having turned their heads and not seeing anything strange, Lin's subordinates left. "It's lucky that there's no light here except for the one coming from the window," Uzumaki thought happily, because the darkness in their cell didn't allow the guards to see the door that wasn't completely closed. Naruto, who was tensely pressed against the wall, and Hofyun, who was half sitting on the floor. All that was left was to wait. A couple of minutes later, the clone came and lowered the girls a rope ladder that he had dug up somewhere. Apparently, he had stolen it from someone. Hanketsu was the first to climb up. Slowly but surely she climbed up. However, when the girl was climbing through the window, something unexpected happened. She got stuck because of her kimono. Naruto had to climb after her friend and, literally under the canopy, untie her belt. And it was very difficult to do. In the end, this whole action took about 5 minutes, after which the 10-kilogram belt fell to the basement floor. And behind it several layers of clothing from a kimono. And now, the girl was left only in a light juban and was able to easily get through the window. Phew! Hofyun exhaled happily. "I hate these kimonos. They make me look like a fat cabbage." Naruto just laughed quietly, although she completely agreed with her friend. "It's time to run." "But where to?" "There's a place here. We'll rest there and decide what to do next." Hanketsu nodded and hurried after Uzumaki. It was difficult to get out of the estate. There were just a bunch of guards around. Hofyun got excited and kept babbling something. Uzumaki growled softly, rolled her eyes and made several seals. "Hold your breath," she asked quietly. The daimyo's niece nodded and, taking in as much air as she could, puffed out her cheeks and tried not to breathe. To be sure, she covered her mouth with her hands. Mokutan. Flower of sleep. A small, unremarkable flower grew out of the ground, somewhat resembling a daisy. However, as soon as this flower opened its petals, the air instantly filled with light green smoke, and a second later the guards fell to the ground and began to snore. The advantage of this technique was that it did not affect its user. "That's it, you can breathe," Uzumaki allowed. Hofyun exhaled and took another deep breath, smiling. "How did you do that?" "I heard that shinobi are really strong, but to knock them all out with just one flower." "Cool. That's really cool." Haim of her clan smiled. "It's nice when someone admires you. We have to run. We have about 3 minutes to spare until they wake up." The daimyo's niece nodded and, grabbing Naruko's hand, ran to the back exit of the garden. "About 3 years ago, when I first got here, I examined the entire estate and the entire garden. There is one hole here. It is completely inconspicuous. No one knows about it." The blonde nodded and ran after her friend. They got out of the garden unnoticed. Just as the girls were crawling through a really inconspicuous hole hidden behind the ivy, the guards began to wake up. And then Uzumaki, taking the initiative into her own hands, ran to the house where they had temporarily settled together with Hashirama and Jiraiya. Of course, they had to get lost a little, since the girl did not know the way, but in the end they came to where they needed to. Knocking on the door, Uzumaki began to wait for an answer. At first there was some rustling, and then the door opened. A tall blonde stood on the threshold. "Finally! You have no idea how worried we were about you," the woman said in Hashirama's voice. Who is that with you? Hofyun, Naruko introduced her friend. Let us in, we'll tell you everything now. Hashirama nodded and stepped away from the doorway. Naruko immediately flew into the house, dragging Hanketsu with her, and then bolted the door. And what happened to you? A graying man came out into the corridor. Jiraiya, who took the appearance of the owner of the house.